Good on you. The former Attorney General, just say to our viewers, having listened to Donald there, the former Attorney General William Barr said that people who are now criticising the Durham report are the people who perpetrated the big lie and advanced the false narrative, peddled it to the American people, doing immense damage to our country and its institutions. And of course, someone should be accountable. You talked about what's happening in our country. We could talk all night, but I want to address this problem that you alluded to about us being a great country, and it's sad to see what's happening here. Race is dividing us. Your dad spoke in 2020. And this is a magnificent speech to celebrate Independence Day on July 4 at the Mount Rushmore National Memorial. I've mentioned this to my viewers many times. The memorial is an emblem of America's president past, where we see the granite face of Mount Rushmore and a colossal sculpture featuring the 18-metre heads of Presidents Washington, Jefferson, Roosevelt and Lincoln. And your father condemned what he described as, quote, a merciless campaign to wipe out our history, defame our heroes, erase our values, and indoctrinate our children, unquote. Now, Donald, I said at the time we should be grateful that your father is on such a line. Is this what you mean by the threat to Western society?
I think without question, you see that. The attack on family structure, the attack, the pushing of some of these concepts, Alan, that a few short years ago, we would have said there's no way that even the most radical of the left can believe this. In our country, it's the pushing of genital mutilation of young children because some purple-haired teacher indoctrinates them and tells them they don't know what sex they are. That is the cause of and solution for all of life's problems. The radical left has taken over every major institution in America and probably the world. They're pushing their nonsense ideology on everyone. They're trying to dismantle everything that is good and decent in the world and in our history. And again, I think my father's 100% spot on in all of that. And we've been watching this happen. The selective prosecution of their enemies, the list goes on and on.
Yeah, I mean, in that speech, and I just repeat it for our viewers, in that Mount Rushmore speech, the then President Trump said this, and I quote, there's a new far-left fascism that demands absolute allegiance. If you do not follow its commands, you'll be censured and punished. That is not going to happen to us, he said. We will not be tyrannized. We will never surrender the spirit of July 4, 1776. Donald, people listening to us would say that some have surrendered.
Oh, I think without question. I think that was perhaps the lesson we learned from COVID, not just about the countries, but just how quickly some people did surrender, gave up their rights, gave up their freedoms, caved into what in many cases, what I believe to be almost a totalitarian regime, mandating things not based on actual science. And you could see that from the Fauci emails to his colleagues seem to be almost exactly the opposite of what he said to the American public. But I guess whatever would get him on the cover of a magazine was the important narrative.
Right.
If Donald Trump did something right, then it was automatically wrong. And we now have seen all of those things disproven. The conspiracy theorists that so many of us have been dubbed and labeled, they seem to be batting 1,000, Alan. They seem to be right about everything. And yet our super highly educated elitists have been wrong about virtually everything, and that continues to get proven as each and every conspiracy theory falls time. I think the problem is they get what they want out of it at the time. 2 years later, when they're proven wrong, even though we all knew they were wrong to begin with, it no longer matters. They've win and they move on.
And that's where we are today. Look, I often argue here, Donald, that we've got indoctrination, not education. Now, your father told a conference on US history at the Washington National Archives in September 2020, and this is what President Trump said, and I quote, the left-wing rioting and mayhem are the direct result of decades of left-wing indoctrination in our schools. Donald, we've got it here. What should be done?
Listen, I think we have to get parents back involved. I think we have to end sort of the social pressures. We see that, in America, being a conservative, there's a social consequence to that. We've seen that taken further in government, where our own FBI and Department of Justice have literally called concerned parents, simply talking against the indoctrination that you mentioned happening in our schools at parent-teacher meetings, at parental conferences in our schools. Those were labeled domestic terrorists. concerned parents were labeled domestic terrorists. Now, actual terrorists can go and commit crimes, and they were watched, but they weren't able to be prosecuted or looked at too because they checked some sort of woke box. And, God forbid we actually look at real criminals. But that's where we're going, and that's a Rubicon I don't think we want to cross.